Hello and welcome to another video review. This is the Blackwell Epiphany for PC. This is the fifth and final game in the Blackwell series and was developed by Wadjet Eye Games. It was released in April of this year, and it was to a rather large amount of acclaim. People were showing us off as the proper way to end a series, at least as far as I've seen on things like Twitter and such like that. I admittedly haven't paid all that much attention to the reviews and such, because I wanted to go into this thing pretty much blind. And the question there is, having played the other Blackwell games and rather enjoyed them actually, how does Blackwell Epiphany stack up, and is it the proper end to a series like this? Well, before we really answer that question, let's first talk about the presentation, which is about on par with Blackwell Deception, although the only real difference here is that the sprite work animation is slightly better. It's not that big of a degree better than the previous game in the series. It's just enough that if you played the previous games, you'll notice it. But that's about it. It looks like an old school adventure game, and the sound design also fits it very well. Again, that's on par with Blackwell Deception, and the voice actors from previous games return, so the people you're used to by now as far as playing Joey and Rosa and everybody, they all make a return. So they've done a good job with it. It's very consistent as far as its presentation goes, so there's really not that much to talk about. But obviously what really matter here are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this is that you play once again as Rosa Blackwell and her spirit guide Joey Malone, and the game starts out pretty much how you'd expect. You're investigating this dilapidated apartment building and trying to move a spirit onto the next world. And once you've accomplished that, the real meat of the story actually begins when a man is actually murdered right in front of her and his spirit is torn apart. Yeah, it gets pretty dark in this game. The previous game was darker than the previous ones as well, but this one kind of ramps it up. And this is where the real brilliance of the story is, because this is what ties together the rest of the games in the series. And to understand what's going on in Blackwell Epiphany, you really do have to have played the previous 4 games, and you have to have played them in sequence. Now here's the thing. To go any further into the story would also spoil this game and just completely ruin it for you. So I'm not really going to go any further into the story, but what I'm going to say is that I don't really see any other way the Blackwell series could have ended. The way that this thing ends, it ties together pretty much everything from the previous 4 games, makes it all make sense. Some of the things that didn't make any sense in the previous games because they just didn't give you quite enough information at the time. It was one of those kind of teaser things, are finally explained in this one, and things follow a very natural conclusion. And the ending, it just leaves you very satisfied. You just go into this thing and you know from the very beginning that it's going to be the last Blackwell game, because they've announced it. They've said this is the last game in the series. And the way they've ended the series, I really couldn't see any other way that the series could have ended, and they've done a phenomenal job of tying together a series that has introduced new elements over the course of the previous 4 games, and they've managed to tie it all together into a cohesive plotline that keeps you interested to the very end, and ends in a very satisfying manner. And so I have to applaud them for that. And then, of course, there's the gameplay, which admittedly is not the strongest part of these games. The puzzles in this game aren't particularly difficult. They may take you a few moments to figure out, but nothing particularly hard to figure out. Sometimes you might need to just think on things for a while or take a break and come back to it with a fresh mind or something like that, but nothing is going to keep you stumped for very long, and it's not a very long game either. So ultimately, what you're going into with this thing is an adventure game that is on par with the previous games and slightly better. Not really enough to affect the score or anything, but slightly better than Blackwell Deception, because it does tie together everything from the series, and it gives you this very satisfying ending to what has been a very, very solid adventure game series. And I really have to applaud them for this. They've done a phenomenal job of putting together a game series that, instead of getting worse over time, actually got better over time, and ended in a very satisfying manner that leaves you not really wanting more, actually. Although it would be nice, kind of interesting to see what happens after this, but it's rare that a game ending to a series leaves you with that kind of satisfaction. It's like that you've completed the story, you've completed this whole plot line, and you're fine with that. And they've done a phenomenal job with that. So ultimately, I give Blackwell Epiphany a 4 out of 5. Just remember, if you're going to go into this game, play the previous 4 games first. Play them in sequence. And then you'll get the most out of Blackwell Epiphany. Because otherwise, you're going to have absolutely no idea what's going on. And when you go through Blackwell Epiphany, you'll just sit there scratching your head, wondering what's going on. But for the rest of us, the people who've played the Blackwell series and have played all those games in sequence beforehand, this is an incredibly satisfying ending to the series that you really can't miss. Again, 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching.